Periodically here at Cultaholic, we like to share a selection of humorous, silly, crazy, and possibly harrowing stories of professional wrestlers either behaving badly on the road or encountering unbelievable scenarios in their travels that test their wits and/or sanity. The crazier the better, we say, as previous installments of Pro Wrestling Road Stories have revealed. Now, you may be wondering, how could they possibly top stories like a ring truck falling through ice, or Andre the Giant trying to drown wrestlers, or a bunch of guys urinating on Ric Flair's hotel bed? Well, it's not easy, but we're damn sure gonna try. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 crazy wrestling road stories that defy reality. Part 5! Join us. Number 10. Zero Chili. One thing the travel-weary wrestler will always appreciate is a nice home-cooked meal, because day after day of diner food and McDonald's can get a little tiresome. For a time, wrestlers stopping in Kansas City could hit up the home of 8-time NWA World Champion Harley Race, as the legendary grappler took great pleasure in hosting his industrial peers and serving them barbecue. Race apparently took immense pride in both his hospitality and his culinary skills, which is why one famous wrestler learned the hard way why you shouldn't mess with Harley's cooking. Owen Hart was a notorious prankster, the master of the usually harmless rib. Well, one could debate how harmless it was when he took an extra potent hot sauce and spiked a pot of Race's chili with it. The partaking wrestlers all burned their taste buds to high hell, and Owen had a great laugh at everyone's expense. But Owen wasn't laughing at the next day's TV tapings, 1 hour away in Topeka, Kansas, when Race hunted him down in the shower and zapped a naked King of Hearts with a cattle prod. Some of you may think driving 1 hour to stick somebody with a cattle prod a full day after they executed a practical joke is excessive, but those of you who have had good chili will understand. Number 9. Babyface assassination. In Jake Hager's time with All Elite Wrestling, he has constantly had the back of Chris Jericho. Whether it's in the Inner Circle or the Jericho Appreciation Society, Big Jake has loomed large in the presence of Le Champion. At one time or another on camera, Jericho has explained his loyalty to Hager in passing, mentioning that the Big Hurt had his back in Abu Dhabi years earlier, leading many to wonder what sort of crazy situation Jericho and Hager found themselves in. In 2012, when both men were still in WWE, the two were on a tour of Abu Dhabi and were at a club one night. Jericho claims he gave a body check to some loudmouth at a club in passing just for being an annoyance. Later on, this irate individual informed Jericho of his family's wealth and put a $7 million bounty on Jericho's head, vowing he would be dead within 24 hours. Jericho didn't know if the guy was serious or not, but no matter, the man then known as Jack Swagger had Jericho's back for all 24 hours. Turns out the guy was full of it and Jericho was not in danger, though he didn't know that at the time. However, the ordeal did reveal Hager's unflinching loyalty and explains why Jericho is proud to keep him around. Number 8. MYSTERIO'S disappearance. Traveling city to city can really spike one's sense of ennui, so it's oftentimes up to wrestlers to create their own fun. How this is achieved is really up to the wrestlers themselves and can range anywhere from wholesome and innocent to nobody's ever going to believe this police report. Somewhere in the middle was the fun Rey Mysterio and Shelton Benjamin had during the early days of the brand extension, which involved an unsuspecting audience in the form of convenience store clerks and any customers milling about. Neither an unmasked Mysterio nor a still new Benjamin were especially recognizable to the general public, which was the key here. The two SmackDown stars would enter convenience stores separately, walk about a bit, and then bump into each other by chance, which led them to loudly arguing over who bumped into who, giving the impression that a huge fight was about to break out. The simple fun was seeing the cashier plead with them not to fight in their store while Mysterio and Benjamin exchanged angry threats. One time they took it further as Benjamin left the store first and got into the van he was traveling in. Mysterio left second and then was forcibly kidnapped by Benjamin and the other occupants of the van. As Shelton and company absconded into the night with Ray, he said that the cashier was freaking out like you couldn't believe. Number 7. Showstopper. It's always a bad idea for a fan or any other civilian to try and start a fight with a pro wrestler. Even if said wrestler is a light heavyweight or plays the role of a sniveling coward on camera or whatever, there is a good chance that they have what it takes to easily neutralize you, if not outright kick your ass. That said, you would have to be a special kind of stupid to try and start a fight with Paul White, who stands around 7 feet tall and weighs at least 400 pounds. One individual made that mistake in June of 1998, when White was wrestling as the Giant for WCW. Following a Monday Nitro taping at Nassau Coliseum, White checked into the Marriott Hotel next door, where a 6'6" bar patron confronted White, cursing at him and making obscene gestures in front of a large gathered crowd. Then, when the unruly patron shoved White, the much larger wrestler responded with a wild punch that shattered the man's jaw. White was later charged with assault, but found not guilty. You know, some people felt that Big Show's WMD knockout punch was silly, daring to say that it was an unrealistic finishing move. Au contraire, my friends, at least one person can attest that it packs a wallop. And if his jaw's not still wired shut, he'll tell you himself. Number 6. Duck Duck Grey Goose. While Owen Hart proved to be a masterful ribber in his own right, Mr. Fuji was much more notorious for the depths that he would sink to in order to execute a prank. Some are innocent but elaborate, while others veer well over the line of heinous. Whatever end of the spectrum Fuji's ribs would fall, the man was somebody that wrestlers learned to be careful around. While you might think that this would make wrestlers steer clear of pranking Fuji so as not to incur his wrath, Fuji wasn't completely immune to being the butt of a joke. Veteran wrestler Dutch Savage recalls the time he and Lonnie Moondog Mayne once got Fuji good. Mayne had invited Fuji to go duck hunting with him the following day, an invitation which Fuji accepted. However, that night at the show they were working, Fuji got pissed drunk and passed out. Sensing an opportunity, Savage and Mayne took Fuji to a nearby retirement home that had a duck pond. They stripped him naked, laid him on a raft, placed a shotgun over his chest, pushed him out on the pond, and then just left him there. The next morning, a bleary and confused Fuji awoke to find himself in that predicament, while police and several elderly residents stared at him from the shore with equal confusion. Supposedly, Fuji didn't talk to Savage or Mayne for several months after the fact. Number 5. A giant road hazard. The stories we hear about Andre the Giant sound almost too fantastical to be true. No doubt, Andre was an extraordinary man who lived an extraordinary life, but whenever we hear tales about Andre's drinking prowess or his superhuman strength, we have a bit of a pause. On one hand, we marvel at such stories, but there is a part of us that thinks, no, that's just gotta be exaggerated. I leave it up to you, dear viewer, to decide if this piece of oft-repeated Andre lore did in fact happen. Bushwhacker Luke, Arnold Scarland, and others have recalled a time in Montreal in the early 70s when some purportedly drunken college kids mouthed off at Andre and other wrestlers at a truck stop diner. Some sources claim one of the youths actually struck Andre. The college kids quickly fled to their Volkswagen with an angry giant in hot pursuit. But before they could drive to safety, Andre reached the side of the car. Then, to the shock and horror of everyone, especially those drunks, Andre lifted the car from the side and proceeded to overturn it, with 4 adult humans inside. 20-something Andre was a mountain of power before the injuries and insurmountable growth set in, but could he have possibly flipped a car on its side? Fabled or not, it's still pretty fun to think about. Number 4. No patience for ribs. Life on the road can take its toll on even the most resilient tough guy wrestlers. All the travel, the lack of normalcy, and managing bumps, bruises, and worse while crisscrossing the endless terrain can and will lead to the occasional outburst. One night in the early 1980s, Paul Orndorff hitched a ride somewhere in Ohio with Brian Blair, Tommy Rich, and Tony Atlas, and Orndorff was said to be in a foul mood for one reason or another. His mood grew even more testy thanks to an odor that he found unpleasant. In a second-hand version of events from Tito Santana's memoirs, Orndorff was apparently repulsed by the smell of barbecue ribs that Atlas had in the car. Orndorff was annoyed enough that he was going to throw them out of the car, which Atlas advised him not to do. Feeling like Atlas was challenging him, Orndorff demanded that the car be stopped. The two ended up skirmishing on the side of the road, where Atlas eventually managed to tie a furious Mr. Wonderful up in a hold, hoping that he would calm down. After Rich and Blair broke up the fight, they realized that Atlas's ear was bloody and the lobe was dangling because Orndorff had bitten him. Mike Tyson style. They took Atlas to the hospital to get it fixed while Orndorff apologized profusely and the two quickly patched things up. Sometimes ribs lead to fights in wrestling, but rarely these types of ribs. Number 3, say anything, brother. Polarizing as he may be, there is no denying that Hulk Hogan is one of the most important and famous professional wrestlers of all time. During the 1980s, Hogan helped bring wrestling back into the mainstream, and he did so with what was then considered a clean and wholesome image. But imagine the Hulkster having the same level of success with a felony conviction on his record. That could have well happened several years before Hulkamania ran wild, no thanks in part to the wrestlers he was traveling with. Sometime around the early 80s, Hogan was driving through New Jersey with the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika. At one point, the heavyweight triumvirate was pulled over by a state trooper who asks for Hulk's license and registration. Hogan opened the glove compartment to get the paperwork, only for his unlicensed handgun to fall out. Having an unlicensed gun in the state of New Jersey carried a 1-year prison sentence at the time, and the cop ordered the 3 wrestlers out of the car before handcuffing them. A frightened Hogan asked the Samoans to back him up to explain that he was from Florida and didn't know the different state laws. Instead, Afa and Sika said nothing because they were adhering to kayfabe and weren't willing to speak English in front of a cop. Eventually, the mess got sorted out and the wrestlers weren't charged, but man, were the Wild Samoans actually willing to go to prison just to avoid breaking character? Number 2, off the cuffs. Haku has been something of a staple in these videos because everybody from Haku's time in the business has a story to tell about the Tongan King. Compiled together, the tales tell of a man that could stop an army tank with a headbutt and could take out an enemy aircraft by throwing a cinder block at it. Mere mortals and other wrestlers have tested Haku, only to come away with a better understanding of why Haku is undefeated in life. But it's not always humans that get wrecked by the monster Meng, it's also inanimate objects. There are a few variations of this story, which is set in St. Louis after a show one night. While at some drinking establishment, a few of the patrons, possibly other wrestlers, got into an alcohol-fueled skirmish, causing Haku and others to intervene. When the police showed up amid the pull-apart, a few of the boys in blue assumed that Haku was one of the instigators and proceeded to mace him before handcuffing him behind his back. Apparently, this only amused Haku, who, through his now reddened eyes, proceeded to snap the handcuffs in one clean motion. Now you may think, no flippin' way, but remember, this is the same man that once bit a guy's nose off for calling wrestling fake. Are you going to question Haku? Good luck. Number 1, skirmish in the sky. Vince McMahon has been known to have, shall we say, an adventurous spirit, and it's put him in some interesting predicaments throughout his life. A freakishly competitive individual, McMahon feels the need to test his might against the greatest possible challenges. That's why he decided one day that he was going to shoot wrestle Kurt Angle, an Olympic gold medalist in freestyle wrestling, as you may know. But the choice of venue wasn't the ring or even the backstage area, it was on board an international flight. McMahon had apparently overindulged on wine and started having various wrestlers try to lure Angle, who just wanted to sleep, to the back of the plane, where the ever-cunning Vince lay in wait. Each time Angle obliged, Vince jumped out to attack, only for Angle to quickly tie him in a knot. Once McMahon realized that Angle had caught on to his traps, he started waiting for Angle to doze off so that he could lunge at him then. Each time, however, Angle was simply too much for the boss. Even deep into the flight, when the plane was about to land, McMahon was allegedly army-crawling toward Angle, maneuvering over the spilled wine stains on the plane's carpeted floor. Angle estimates that he and Vince clashed 25 times during the long flight, and it doesn't look like McMahon picked up a single victory before the wheels touched down.